As we delve deeper into this harrowing tale, it's important to remember that Hugh Despenser, while reviled, was not beyond the pale of medieval nobility. He was tried and convicted in a manner common to his time. However, the severity and brutality of his punishment serve as a stark reminder of the turbulent times in which he lived. England during the 14th century was a powder keg of political intrigue, social unrest, and power struggles. It was a world where one could ascend to great heights through the favor of a monarch, yet fall just as quickly if that favor waned. Hugh's story is a testament to that volatility. His punishment, however, transcends the boundaries of his own era. It forces us to confront the depths of human cruelty and the lengths to which envy, hatred, and fear can drive people. The mutilation of his corpse was not just a means of executing him. It was a symbolic annihilation. By dissecting and displaying his remains, the people of England ensured that Hugh Despenser the Younger would not rest in peace. They wanted to sever his connection to humanity, both in life and in death. Such extreme measures serve as a reminder of the dangers of unchecked ambition and the darkest recesses of the human psyche. As we reflect on Hugh's fate, we are compelled to ask why such brutality was deemed necessary. What drove the people of England to seek not just his punishment, but his utter erasure? In examining these questions, we gain insight into the social, political, and psychological forces that shaped this dark episode in history. Moreover, by understanding the context of his punishment, we can better comprehend the depths of depravity to which humanity is capable. The treatment of Hugh Despenser's body serves as a grim reflection of the societal attitudes towards those who dared to challenge the established order. In a world governed by rigid hierarchies and absolute power, those who transgressed the boundaries of their station did so at their own peril. Hugh's punishment was not merely a consequence of his actions, but also a means of reinforcing the existing power structure. By making an example of him, the people of England sought to send a message to other nobles and potential rivals. Furthermore, Hugh's punishment reflects the deep-seated resentment and anger felt by the populace towards those they perceived as corrupt and power-hungry. Hugh Despenser the Younger had become a symbol of everything the people despised. He represented the abuse of power, the manipulation of the king, and the disregard for the suffering of the masses. By humiliating and mutilating his body, the people sought to vent their frustrations and assert their own agency in a world that often seemed to be controlled by forces beyond their grasp. However, it's essential to recognize that while Hugh's punishment may seem extreme and barbaric by today's standards, it was not entirely without precedent in medieval England. The concept of public spectacle and the use of violence as a means of social control were not unique to this time period. Rather, they were part of a broader cultural context that permeated various aspects of medieval life. From the public executions of criminals to the mock pageants held during royal festivals, medieval society had a fascination with public displays that could shock, entertain, and educate the masses. Nonetheless, the treatment of Hugh's body stands out as an extreme example of this tendency. It goes beyond the realm of mere public spectacle and ventures into the territory of sadistic torture and dehumanization. By dissecting and displaying his remains, the people of England sought not just to punish Hugh, but to annihilate his identity and sever his connection to humanity. In conclusion, the mutilation of Hugh Despenser's body was not merely a brutal punishment, but a chilling display of societal attitudes towards power, corruption, and the abuse of authority. It was a means of controlling the narrative, silencing dissent, and reinforcing the established order. While we may recoil at the barbarity of such acts today, it's crucial to understand the historical context that allowed them to occur. Only then can we fully comprehend the depths of human cruelty and the lengths to which power and prejudice can drive people. Thank you for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please hit the like button. Your support helps us continue to bring history to life. This is a tale as old as humanity. Love, desire, and death, entwined in a dance as old as time. In the 14th century England, the stage was set for a drama of passion and betrayal. Starring King Edward III's favorite, Hugh Despenser. We begin our tale in the twilight years of Edward II's reign. The king, known for his numerous mistresses, had found solace and companionship in a most unlikely candidate, Hugh Despenser, a young courtier who had captured the king's heart. Their bond was unusual, to say the least, drawing criticism and scorn from the nobility, who deemed it unbecoming for a king to display such familiarity with a commoner. But Edward, enamored by Hugh, lavished upon him titles, lands, and favors, a display of affection that only fueled the fires of envy and resentment among the barons. Amongst them, Queen Isabella, the king's wife, despised Hugh. Humiliated by the brazen manner in which he paraded his power before her very throne, she saw him not as a fellow subject, but as a rival for her husband's affections, a thorn in her side that she was determined to remove. Her chance came when Edward, during a hunting trip, fell ill and perished. Some whisper poison, but that's a tale for another day. With the king's demise, Hugh found himself at the mercy of a vengeful Queen Isabella, who wasted no time in having him stripped of his titles and banished from the kingdom. But Isabella's machinations did not stop there. Her sights were set on the young heir to the throne, Edward III, whom she envisioned as a puppet king under her control. She aligned herself with Roger Mortimer, a disgraced baron who had been in exile since his opposition to Edward II. Together, they engineered a coup, deposing the young king and establishing Mortimer as regent, effectively seizing control of the government and the kingdom. Now, this was no fairy tale. Oh no. This was a medieval power struggle of epic proportions. Accusations, plots, and counterplots swirled around the court as nobles aligned themselves with either the queen or the young king's faction. Desperation drove Hugh into hiding, but his days of freedom were numbered. On October 26, 1326, Queen Isabella's forces cornered him in Bristol Castle. Despite pleas for mercy, his fate was sealed. What followed was a spectacle of unimaginable brutality. Hugh was dragged through the streets, taunted and tormented by the very citizens he had once charmed. Finally, his battered body was thrown into a dungeon where his tormentors stripped him naked, bound him, and began the gruesome process of dismemberment. To ensure that none of his followers dared defy them, his entrails were cut out and displayed publicly. Then, as if to make an example of him, his body was quartered and his remains scattered across England. Yet amidst this darkness, whispers of a conspiracy emerged. Some claimed that Hugh had poisoned the late King Edward. Others whispered that his execution was nothing but a display of Queen Isabella's tyrannical rule. Regardless, Hugh's life hung in the balance. Roger Mortimer, ever cunning, understood the value of appearances. While he officially held no enmity towards Hugh, he saw the value in silencing the whispers, in making an example of Hugh to deter any potential challengers to their newfound power. So he ordered that Hugh's execution be swift and public, a spectacle designed to shock and awe. And thus, in the heart of London, amidst the jeers of the crowd, Hugh Despenser met his end. His crime: to love a king. In the annals of history, few tales are as tragic. Few stories evoke as much sorrow and rage as the tale of Hugh Despenser, the favorite who dared to love, too boldly, too openly, too passionately. His punishment: a brutal reminder of the cost of such love in a world governed by cold calculations of power and control. Yet, as the dust settled on that fateful day in October, something lingered, a cold satisfaction amongst those who had orchestrated his fall. Queen Isabella, once humiliated by the sight of her husband's favorite parading power before her very throne, now stood triumphant. Roger Mortimer, the exiled baron turned kingmaker, had demonstrated exactly what happens to those who dare love a king too boldly, too openly, too dangerously. This was a cautionary tale, one that would echo through generations, shaping the very fabric of courtly love and the price one pays for loving a king. For in the Game of Thrones, there are no second chances, no do-overs. And for Hugh Despenser, the stakes were his life. And in the end, it wasn't the love that killed him, but the price his heart made him pay. Death had come for Hugh Despenser, and when it arrived, it didn't come alone. It brought with it the collapse of a kingdom, the destruction of a family, and the birth of a legend. On September 25, 1326, as the bells of St. Paul's Cathedral tolled, hundreds gathered around the old gallows at Tyburn. For them, it was a day like any other. Work was done, drinks were bought, jokes were cracked, and soon enough, the sky darkened with clouds and rain. So the crowd moved closer to the makeshift scaffold. They shifted from foot to foot, eager to find shelter under the gibbet, where two men awaited them: Roger Mortimer and Isabella of France, Queen of England. The two had fought tooth and nail to take the crown from King Edward II, and now they basked in their victory. Cheers rose from the crowd, mingling with the rain. They shouted, "Long live the Queen, and death to traitors." And in the heart of the mob, a single figure watched, hidden in the grey drizzle. Edward III, the young prince, heir to the throne, future king. He watched, as his mother waved from above, then turned away, quickly, hiding his face behind a hood. Those cheers were for his parents. That hate was for him. And even though he was only 14 years old, he understood the game had changed. That day, Berkeley Castle was burning, not just with rage, but with sorrow. For there, in the depths of its stone heart, was another prisoner awaiting his fate, a captive audience to the downfall of a dynasty. Edward II, the deposed king, the disgraced monarch, now stripped of everything but life, which was slowly draining away like water through a sieve. All because of Hugh Despenser, whose absence echoed through the halls like a spectre. Without Hugh, Edward was not Edward. Without Hugh, the throne was empty. Without Hugh, the castle walls were haunted. It was as if the very air grew colder, as if the shadows stretched longer, as if the flags above flew at half-mast in a kingdom without sunshine. He walked the ramparts alone, sometimes talking to the wind, sometimes screaming into the void. Sometimes he prayed, sometimes he wept. And every tear, every word, every breath was a testament to the ruin that awaited him. Because Edward, too, knew what happened to Despenser could happen to him. The entire kingdom seemed to shiver at the thought. But no one could protect him. Not his counselors. Not his courtiers. Not even his mother. Everyone feared the wrath of Isabella and Mortimer. Everyone except the Queen's son. Edward III approached his mother's court disguised as a page, hiding his identity under layers of cloth and routine. He bowed to courtiers, curtsied to nobles, endured the snickers of peers. He was the disgraced king's shadow, moving where he moved, speaking when he spoke, bearing the weight of his father's sorrow. And it was a heavy burden for a child, especially one born to rule. But he carried on, watching, learning, listening, planning, until the day came when he acted. He confronted his mother, demanding her leave England. He promised her exile, promised her riches beyond measure. And she agreed, but not out of love or respect. She left because Edward III had shown her the true cost of power. He'd proven the past could not be rewritten, the future could not be bargained for, and the people would not tolerate a queen who sat on a throne built on ashes. So Isabella fled, taking with her the memory of a kingdom lost. And in her wake, she left a prophecy. The throne of England had changed hands, but it would change again. Another rose to claim the crown, but also to bury the past. And when he rose, he would do so not as Edward III, but as the son of Despenser. Welcome back to my channel. This house is haunted. If you spend enough time here, you'll feel it. You'll hear echoes of voices from centuries past, footsteps on the stairs, when there are no other visitors, doors opening on their own, when the building is empty, objects moving as if nudged by unseen hands. Sometimes the ghost is angry, sometimes it's sad, but always it's desperate to be noticed, to be acknowledged, to tell its story before it fades away forever. In this house, the ghosts linger longer. Their story intertwines with the very structure, with the stones and timbers, can feel their pain and confusion as if it were our own. Their loss echoes through the halls, a constant undercurrent. The air grows thick with longing and regret. In the 14th century, this house witnessed a gruesome spectacle. A man's final moments as he dangled from a rope, his body torn apart, his life spilling onto the ground below. The people of London gathered around, their cheers and jeers echoing in these very chambers, their shadows staining the walls. The unfortunate soul dangling outside was Hugh Despenser, the king's favorite, his confidant, his friend. Too many in the court, Hugh was more than a favorite. He was family. But to the rest of the kingdom, he was a villain, a symbol of everything they hated about the monarchy. As Hugh's body swayed in the air, his face contorted in fear and pain, his cries for mercy unanswered, a chilling silence fell over the crowd. In that moment, something shifted in the hearts of the people, a realization that they were witnessing not just the death of a man, but the end of an era. With each cut of the rope, they saw the unraveling of their own hopes and dreams, their fears and uncertainties. As Hugh's life ebbed away, they saw their own mortality staring back at them, a stark reminder of their own frailty and the unexpected turns of fate. The body of Hugh Despenser was long gone. It had been reduced to ash, scattered across city gates, rotted into the wind, but his presence never fully vanished. In the years following his execution, his name haunted England's conscience, like a ghost no prayer could dispel. In the dark corridors of power, his fate was invoked, not out of justice, but fear. Fear of being too close, too favored, too essential to the wrong person. For what Despenser represented was something far more dangerous than treason. He represented intimacy in the cold machinery of empire, a softness in a world that demanded steel, and that was a crime none would forgive. As Edward III settled into his rule, England shifted, stability returned, order was restored, and the court once again wore its mask of dignity and tradition. But deep beneath the polished veneer, there lingered a quiet dread. A shared understanding that what had happened to Despenser, and to his king, could happen again. Every noble who whispered into a monarch's ear did so with the memory of a man tied to a ladder and cut open while still screaming. Every advisor who stood too close to power remembered the fire, the crowd, the mutilation performed not just as punishment, but as message. Be careful whom you love. Be careful what you become when a king trusts you. Even the clergy, who once denounced Hugh's sins, grew uneasy in their silence. Many had blessed his execution. Others watched from behind the safety of scripture. But as the years passed, they began to wonder whether their complicity had cursed them too. Sermons shifted. Penance was whispered in darker tones. And across monasteries, the tale of Despenser became more than history. It became an omen, a reminder that even the most sacred institutions could become tools of vengeance. When fear ruled the altar, the chronicles of the time, eager to cleanse the image of Edward III, softened their records. Despenser's crimes were exaggerated, his character vilified, his proximity to the king reduced to manipulation rather than affection. They scrubbed away what made the story truly terrifying. Not the political overreach, not the corruption, but the vulnerability. The emotional thread between two men torn apart by a world that could not, or would not, understand it. But despite their efforts, the truth clung to the margins in obscure records. In foreign accounts, in coded phrases and symbolic metaphors, the people remembered. Maybe not clearly, maybe not fully, but they remembered that something had been taken too far. That power had once devoured love, and called it justice. In time, plays were written, retellings emerged, and the image of Hugh Despenser became blurred, part historical figure, part tragic character, part embodiment of what happens when passion enters the palace. He was no longer just a man who died. He was the question the monarchy never wanted to answer. What happens when kings stop pretending? When they see more in a companion than just a servant? When they feel, centuries passed, England changed. Thrones rose and fell. But the echo of Despenser's fate remained embedded in the monarchy's DNA. Even those who never spoke his name lived in the shadow of his story. And in every royal scandal, in every favorite turned outcast, in every exile and mysterious downfall, there were traces of him. The man who climbed too high, loved too deeply, and was punished with a death designed not to kill, but to erase. And yet he wasn't erased, he endured. Not in monuments or memorials, but in unease. In the way historians hesitated to write the full truth. In the way textbooks glossed over his end. In the way artists painted the court of Edward II with a quiet tension that never seemed to lift. It wasn't just about Hugh. It was about what Hugh revealed. About kingship. About love. About the fine line between loyalty and possession. Even in death, he was watching. From the towers of castles, from the pages of chronicles, from the edges of sermons and poems and songs, sung in hushed voices when candles burned low, he was a warning to some, a martyr to others, a riddle to those who dared to question the official version. And always there was the fire, the one they said consumed him, the one they said consumed the king, and the one that still flickered behind the eyes of anyone who got too close to royal favor. Despenser's body may have been scattered, but his story refused to die, because stories born in agony, born in screams, born in flame, those are the ones that cling to history like scars. You don't erase them, you carry them. And so the monarchy, whether it admitted it or not, carried Hugh, carried Edward, carried the silence, the shame, the unspoken grief. Every coronation that followed was conducted under that silent weight. Every court ritual, laced with the memory of what happens when a king's love becomes visible, when the line between ruler and man is blurred by desire. And perhaps that is the true horror. Not the execution, not the mutilation, but the fear of being known. The fear of being remembered, not for your crimes, but for your connection. For having mattered to someone powerful, in a way the world was not ready to accept. This is the archive. All right. Background music fades. This is the story of Hugh Despenser and Edward II. And it's not a story of death. It's a story of punishment, designed to make affection look monstrous. To transform tenderness into treason. To take a man who was once a heartbeat away from a crown and reduce him to a cautionary tale whispered through time. And what endures, centuries later, is not just the memory of torture or the grotesque spectacle of a man's body carved up in public. It's the realization that this happened not because of war, not because of crime, but because of closeness. Because one man loved a king too much. Because a king could not bear to let him go. and the world responded with blades and fire. What makes Hugh's end even more horrific is that he was not a singular case. History is littered with names of favorites destroyed for the crime of proximity, those who were too visible, too influential, too trusted by monarchs who dared show emotion. But Hugh's death was different because of its theatrical brutality. It was not meant to kill him swiftly. It was meant to humiliate, to unmake, to erase identity itself. And that makes it more than history. It makes it a message carved into the DNA of power itself. Centuries have passed, yet the echoes remain. In royal families that hide behind protocol, in leaders too afraid to show weakness, in societies that still punish difference with silence or spectacle, the instruments of torture have changed, but the fear has not. We have no portrait of Hugh Despenser, no image to call our own. But chroniclers left us clues, enough for us to piece together a picture of a young man who might have stepped out of today's headlines. An ambitious, charming, quick-witted guy who knew how to play the game of courtly favor. He uses his smarts, his looks, and his status as a skilled archer to catch the eye of Edward II. A king known more for his passions than policies, a man out of place in a gilded cage. Hugh, as a commoner, should not have been noticed at all. But Edward, needing solace from the weight of his crown, finds in Hugh a friend, then a lover, a confidant, and for a while, their bond seems to offer a glimpse of genuine connection, in a world of pretense. Hugh is rewarded with titles, lands, and influence. He rises to become Earl of Winchester, a position normally reserved for nobles with deep pockets and thicker bloodlines. At one point, he's even named Custos Angli, a kind of deputy king. And when Edward's queen, Isabella, leaves for France, it's Hugh who takes her place in the royal bed. Theirs is a relationship that defies the norms, that threatens the decorum of a kingdom. And it won't stand. Isabella returns to find her husband's heart elsewhere. And when she does, she weaponizes the one thing she knows she can control, custom, while Edward and Hugh act out a twisted fairy tale. Their public appearances becoming more and more like a spectacle, a mockery of courtly love. Isabella plots. She finds allies in powerful places, men who resent Hugh's influence, men who see in him a threat to their own ambitions. Soon, the whispers turn to roars. Hugh's enemies brandish their words like weapons. Roger Mortimer, Isabella's secret lover, and a thorn in Hugh's side from the start, openly calls Hugh a traitor, accuses him of witchcraft, of sodomy, of holding the king in thrall. Hugh fights back, slinging accusations of his own. But the walls are closing in. And when the Queen's brother, the Earl of Kent, joins the fray, demanding Hugh's arrest, it's clear whose side the game is really on. Hugh flees to Bristol, rallying support, gathering men to fight another day. But on September 19, 1326, he is betrayed, captured, and dragged back to London. What follows is both a trial and a performance. Hugh, accused of crimes against the crown and the church, is denied the right to speak in his defense. His accusers are not interested in justice. They're interested in vengeance. After a show trial, he's found guilty and the sentence is announced. Despenser is to be hanged, drawn and quartered, an agonizing death reserved for the most hated traitors. On October, in front of a crowd gathered to watch the spectacle, Hugh is led to the Tower of London. The executioners, armed with swords and hooks, strip him naked, bind him, drag him through the streets, cutting him, beating him. Finally, at the gallows, they leave him hanging until he's nearly dead. Then they cut him down, draw out his entrails, and quarter his body, tossing his limbs and his organs into the crowd, burning them, spearing them on pikes. The grisly pieces of Despenser are sent to four corners of the kingdom, a macabre warning to any who might dare to love too deeply or dream of rising too high. As for Edward, broken and alone, he dies believing that his beloved Hugh has been sacrificed for him. The irony is not lost on history. Edward's reign ends with the death of the one person who understood him better than anyone else ever could. And the kingdom moves on, celebrating Isabella's return as queen, ignoring the ghost of the man who made her exit possible. If you made it this far, you're not just curious. You're someone who refuses to look away from history's darkest corners. You understand that truth isn't always clean. That sometimes the stories that matter most are the ones wrapped in blood, in shame, in silence. So if you're ready to go deeper, into the unspoken, the forgotten, the forbidden, then subscribe to the channel. Every week, we bring you new stories, the textbooks buried. Real history. Raw, unsettling, unforgettable. And we don't flinch. Because someone has to remember. Someone has to speak for the voices extinguished in flame. And someone has to ask, what if it happens again?